financially incentivized to put people on those remedies. And one of the big problems was, particularly for black families, is that they had no access to their grandmother or their mother, who was put in that hospital and was surrounded by people they didn't know, with no access by the family to get in there and to ask questions about the treatment, to watch the declines in health, to see what was working and wasn't working, to talk personally to the doctors about different alternatives. Well, those conversations never took place. So we had this extraordinary death rate, and the other reason for that high death rate among African Americans was the chronic disease burden. The reason we had the highest death rate, according to CDC, we had the highest death rate of any country in the world. We had 16% of the COVID deaths in our country. We only have 4.2% of the global population. We had literally the worst record of any country in the world. We had the highest body count of any nation. One issue is, why are people getting awards for that? And then the other issue is, why were people dying? And one is the denial of access to therapies that were actually working. But if you ask CDC, why were people dying? What they say is chronic disease. That the average person who died from COVID the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So they had diabetes, obesity, and asthma. And what are the populations that suffer from chronic disease the highest? African Americans. If you look at diabetes rate, if you look at 1 out of every 8 African American children are dead. And so why do African Americans have the highest chronic disease rate? They get the bad medicines and they get the bad food. And those urban areas, they're food deserts, where people are eating processed food and bad food. And that is aggravating this diabetes epidemic in this country, the asthma epidemic, all of these allergic diseases, the autoimmune diseases that disproportionately impact black populations. So one of the reasons is the disparity in care, and the other reason is the disparity in power. And if you're a black family, you have much less power to ask questions, to get them answered, to influence the course of care for yourself or for a family member than a typical white family in this country. And the other reason is that black communities are being mass poisoned by bad food. And and who is getting advantage of that? Of course, the processed food industry, the big Monsantos of the world, the Cargills, the big industrial agriculture outfits that now dominate food production in this country. And so those are the issues. And then how do we correct the disparity in care? We need to reorient our medical care system toward local clinics and local hospitals and make it difficult through the SEC for big hedge funds to come in and buy up these hospital systems without answering a lot of questions about, is this going to affect care on the community level? Because if people don't know, if they don't have control over their health care, they are going to get bad health care. They're going to be the victims of these perverse economic incentives that are given to hospitals when they make treatment decisions.
Thank you so much.
My first case as an environmental lawyer was representing the NAACP in a lawsuit on the Austin, New York NAACP, in a lawsuit trying to block a waste transfer facility from being built in the oldest black community in the Hudson Valley. It's not a poor community, but it was a community without political power. And we successfully ended that. We successfully blocked it from happening. And I found out in that lawsuit that this was widespread. This tendency, 4 out of every 5 toxic waste dumps in the country is in a black neighborhood. So the highest concentration of toxic waste dumps in the country is the south side of Chicago. The most contaminated zip code in California is East LA. The largest toxic waste dump in this country is Steele, Alabama, which is 85% black. And you see the impact of toxicity on black populations anywhere you look. 44% of black children in our cities have dangerous levels of lead high enough to cause IQ loss and behavioral disintegration. And so we're not giving these kids a chance because we're mass poisoning them from when they're little. I'll just tell you a quick story. I litigated and ultimately made a multi-billion-dollar deal to save the New York City water supply. But in the course of that, New York City has 3 reservoir systems. 2 of them, the Catskill and Delaware system on the west side of the Hudson, provide the greatest drinking water in the world. It's completely unfiltered. There's nothing between those reservoirs and people's pipes and people's faucets, except for pipes. And it accounts for the incomparable taste of New York City pizza, New York City bagels, because this is regarded as some of the finest tasting drinking water. It has a great mix of minerals. And it has a tiny little system on the east of the Hudson called the Croton system. That system has 500,000 people living in its watershed. It has 102 sewage treatment plants. 30% of them are in violation of their permits, so it's discharging untreated sewage into that water supply. It's very bad water. And I am about the people who drink that water in New York City, about if you drink a cup of coffee during the summertime, about 2% of that cup of coffee has been through a sewage treatment plant that doesn't work. So I was curious and said, what neighborhoods is this water going to? And I asked the city on the Freedom of Information Law, and they said that's national security. But this is 10 years before 9/11, and there was nothing national security at that point. So I sued them, and they litigated for a year and stonewalled me. And then on the steps of the courthouse in New York City, they handed me over the distribution maps. And the Croton system was marked in dark on those maps, the distribution areas. And what it was Harlem, the South Bronx, the Lower East Side, and Hell's Kitchen, all communities of color. And I looked up on the Upper East Side coming down from Harlem, there was a little tiny white space in the sea of dark Croton water. There was one home, literally, that was getting the good stuff from the Catskill system. I had to get a magnifying glass to look at whose house had special pipes that would allow everyone to get the good water. And it turned out to be Gracie Mansion, which was the mayor's house. all of the homes around it, which were largely black homes, were getting the bad stuff. But they were making sure that the mayor got to drink the good water. And so I ended up over my career seeing this again and again and again. You know, Navajo youth have 1,000 times the rate of sexual organ cancer as other Americans. Because the tens of thousands of tons of toxic, radioactive uranium tailings that are dumped on their land. There's 76,000 Hispanic farm workers that are poisoned by pesticide every year, and their families are destroyed by that poisoning. And you know, it's not usually, in my view, overt racism. It's really economic. These are communities where there's nobody in that community that can call the mayor and say there's a big sewage treatment plant in New York, called the North River plant. It takes about 1/10 of the sewage. It was originally going to be built in a place that made geological sense because it was the mouth of the river that empties at 79th Street at the boat basin. And that's where you want it because then everything drains into it. You don't need pumps. Gravity takes it all in there. And that's what you want, it's much cheaper. But the people at 79th Street were wealthy. So they called the mayor and said, you can't put this in my backyard. It got kicked uptown and uptown and uptown, and it ended up on 175th Street, which is a black neighborhood. It's not a poor black neighborhood. It's professionals. It's people who are doctors, attorneys, accountants, and they're affluent blacks, but they weren't people who could pick up the phone and call the mayor. And as a result of that, it was put in there and it stinks to high heaven, and it's degraded the property values in that entire area and reduced economic activity in that area. So that's what we see, what we call environmental justice issues. A lot of times they're class issues, they're economic issues, they're power issues. And unfortunately, it is minorities who do not have the power to move these facilities out of their neighborhoods. When we regulate, we need to be aware of those disparities and make sure, because we'll have a much cleaner environment if we say that the decisions have to be blind to race. Because if that facility had gone to 79th Street, they would have used a lot better technology to make sure there was no stain coming from it. And we'll have a cleaner environment if rich people and white people have to bear the equal burden for people who are poor and minorities.